Okay, welcome everybody. So we are in the second day of the Embodiment Conference, and we are here with the shiny and radiating Leah Stewart. So Leila, nice to meet you. Leila, just to introduce you shortly, is a clinical massage therapist with decades of experience. She's a yoga teacher and therapist with a lifelong passion for movement of all types. She's also a pioneer in the field of movement education, as she opened the first dedicated yoga therapy studios in Canada, as well as developing the anatomy of yoga therapy in a 300-hour yoga therapy training program. She's also an hour author and wrote the book Pathways to a Centered Body. So there is a lot to learn from you, Leila. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and kudos to you and Mark for pulling all of this together. You've done a gargantuan job.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'm calling this Pathways Anatomy, Embodied Anatomy, Experiential Anatomy, Pathway to Embodiment. And I'm just figuring out how to do this sharing. And I call it that because although there's many, many pathways to embodiment, I found that experiential anatomy is a really good way to connect, not just with the body, but to connect with all parts of us. And so I want to start, I have a little slide presentation. I'll talk for maybe 10-15 minutes because this is an experiential anatomy session. So I want to give lots of time for that. So this slide is a cartoon that came to me in 1983, and I've been carrying it around ever since. And don't ask me why. It's one of those things that just kept showing up in all of my boxes and all of my houses. So I came across it again about several years ago, and I realized, you know, this cartoon epitomizes my journey, my life's journey, both in my work and in my life. And so you might not be able to read it, so I'll just read it. It's a Pfeiffer cartoon, and he writes a lot for the New Yorker magazine. So it starts out saying, people are always telling me, Bernard, you don't have a center. They tell me it's okay in your 20s not to have a center, but now you're 45. You have to find your center. And Bernard says, well, about 10 years ago, I did find my center, and it had sharp white teeth and it ate people. Let those who can handle it have their center. Me, I'll stick to my edges. And all of my life, I've been very aware of this dichotomy between center and not in center. And so I'm the opposite of Bernard. I don't want to live from my edges. I want to live from my center. And I called my yoga therapy studio and my massage therapy clinic Center Point, because I realized very early on in my working life that that was my task, to guide people to a sense of their center and to live from there. So I teach experiential anatomy, and it's very different than dry anatomy. I found just learning anatomy very, very boring, actually. And when I discovered experiential anatomy back in, I think, 1989, I was just thrilled because I could combine my love of anatomy, and I confess to being an anatomy geek, with a doorway into the deeper aspects of ourself. And so I guess in a nutshell, experiential anatomy is a way of experiencing at a somatic level, at a body level, your internal structures, your physiology, and it takes sort of dry intellectual knowledge and takes it, which is an intellectual event, it's a mental event, and it takes it into the body so that you can experience it somatically. And when this happens, I find over and over again, people are just fascinated with themselves. when people start to feel, oh, this joint and this fascia and this organ, it's very interesting. And it's a way of knowing yourself that that we're not taught, and it's a way in. And experiential anatomy sort of colors in the lines of the dry anatomy, and it makes anatomy juicy and it makes it real for the body. So the nervous system works with whatever information it has, and dry anatomy stays up here as a mental event. But when you take it into the body, then it becomes a somatic memory, and the nervous system then uses that information in your everyday life, in your yoga poses, in whatever it is that you're doing. And it gives touchstones for the body. So if you need grounding, then you can go to your feet and you can visualize certain things in your feet and feel that. Or if you have a shoulder injury, then if you know something about how your shoulder works, then you can minimize pain and maximize your range of motion. So the second thing about experiential anatomy is that it develops interoceptive skills. So we've got our proprioceptive skills, where we are in space, our speed, weight, that kind of thing. Our exteroceptive perception, which is using our eyes, our ears to receive something from the outer world. And our interoceptive capacity is going inside and developing a felt sense of our internal processes, our inner sensations, our feelings, and our anatomical structures. And that's processed in a different part of the brain. And it produces a somatic memory, which seems to last longer. So the difference between anatomy and experiential anatomy is the difference between knowledge and knowing. Two very different experiences. So when we work with experiential anatomy, then it builds, we've got a body map in our brain, and experiential anatomy builds that body map and colors it in so that we have more of us in our nervous system. And that produces an intelligence, a kinesthetic intelligence. And of course, that creates embodiment, which is what this conference is all about. And with experiential anatomy, what we want to be able to do is shift our mind from one place to another place. So maybe sometimes we need to be working from our organs. And when we have that capacity to shift our awareness, to shift our mind, then that gives us choice. And when we have choice, then that gives us freedom. And it also helps us to know ourselves in a much deeper way. I have found that experiential anatomy is a doorway to the other koshas. And kosha just means that in yogic terms, it's the different layers of consciousness from the most dense, which is body, to the least dense, which is our joy body. And when I like to think of using the body as the doorway, because it's real, it's palpable, and when we're there, when we practice being in our body, then I like to say awareness is awareness is awareness. So we start here, we start with the physical, but then it ripples out into other aspects of ourself. And what I have found in my work is that every part of the body, every system of the body seems to be connected with some aspect of being human. So for example, the arms, which we'll work with today, the arms give and receive. The arms are what effect in the world, what's inside of us. So we embrace someone, we push something away, we cradle a baby. So the arms are how we interact with the outer world. So the fourth sort of why is experiential anatomy interesting and why is it relevant to embodiment is that it gives us a sense of embodiment. So when we start with the physical and we build that awareness, then it increases our capacity to self-inquire, to understand what's going on in our body, and to have compassion for that. And so experiential anatomy can then become a transformative process. And I have a movement teacher for over 30 years, Judith Koltai, and she has a quote that I think really encapsulates this. She says that teaching people to be in their bodies is a radical political act, because when people are in their bodies, they cannot be controlled. And so what I find is that with experiential anatomy, people seem to get themselves back in this world of separation, and getting themselves back in a way that puts us in touch with our inner wisdom and with our deeper self. And when we're able to move from one aspect to another stuff, then another place, then we develop a fluidity, a sort of a flexibility, and we can become aware of, oh, I'm living from this aspect now, and I'm living from that aspect now, and to be able to change back and forth, and what aspect of myself am I connected to. Another reason why experiential anatomy is relevant is that it can keep us very safe. And especially in this world of, I'm in the yoga world, and it's a world of a lot of injuries right now that have come from, I think, people not respecting the limitations of their own anatomical structure, but trying to exploit them. And when you become aware of different aspects of your anatomy and of your physiology, then you can get an inner support from those places, and you don't have to muscle through life, which is what a lot of us do. And when we can play with this, then what seems to happen with this ongoing inquiry is that we find a harmonious relationship with gravity, to the ground, and we feel much safer in ourselves. And of course, there's a whole genre now of attachment theory, vagal theory, all of that, and safety is the probably most important aspect of being in this world in a comfortable way. So then lastly, experiential anatomy can be very therapeutic. So I use it as one of my tools in my yoga therapy toolkit, because when people understand what they look like inside and how things work, then they can start to repattern their alignment habits that maybe aren't so helpful, their breath, their movement patterns, and even to the extent of repatterning perception and how we relate to the world. So I like to say, if you can feel it, you can heal it. So like in family dynamics, we can take one part of our anatomical structure, physiology, and work with that separately, just like in family therapy. Often one person is removed from the family group, some work is done with that person, and then on re-entry, the whole dynamics of the family changes. And in fact, that's what happens with experiential anatomy. So I like to talk about the family of the body and how everything is connected. So next slide, the gifts of embodiment. So I'm not going to say too much about this, because I want this to be more of an experiential practice. But I've been doing this work for almost 30 years now, I guess. And I have found that there's 3 general categories of experience, of how people find their lives changing after integrating this work, after practicing this work. And the first one is compassionate presence. People seem, and this has been my journey as well, becoming more present with yourself, more fully in your body, so that your mind slows down to body time. And the body can only exist in time and space. The mind can go off to the farthest reaches of the universe. So when we bring the mind into the body and it slows down, then we tend not to be grasping at ideas of what should be, some future orientation, or living in the past, or rehashing the past, or wishing that things had been different. We tend not to be judging that, avoiding the past, but instead we tend to be very present, able to see things just as they are, and moving skillfully, much more skillfully, because when you're present, you're able to move much more skillfully. And it seems like we're able to respond much more to the truth of the moment, that we don't argue with reality. I love that. And we're able to be in our witness more, and be in a more, a place of more equanimity, where we can say, oh, isn't that interesting? There, I'm doing that again, or this is happening again. And then the second gift is self-support and self-regulation. So when you have a clear sense of living from your whole self, you're much more likely to remain in touch with your own needs, not be so swayed by what other people are saying or expecting of you, not so likely to override your bodily signals, or to look for external validation. So generally, what I found in myself and in others is there's less tendency to abandon yourself, to separate from yourself. And then the third gift is people seem, and I feel this definitely myself, that I'm more seated in myself. So in all my messiness, in all my gifts, I'm much more able to just be with who I am, and have that be a kinesthetic experience, so that I know when I'm not there, and I know when I'm there. And when I'm there, then I trust myself more, I trust life, and I feel much more comfortable in my own skin. So this is my favorite print. It's a Blake print, and it really embodies for me all of these gifts of embodiment. When we take it down to the very basic level of we are souls having a body experience. And I just love this print in terms of how those two fingers are touching. So the gift of embodiment is that we get our whole self in all of our aspects, from our deepest self to our most trivial self. And that seems to be okay. Okay, we're not going to go there yet. Okay, so I'm going to just leave that. So the practice that I've chosen for today is a practice working with the arms on various levels, from the bones to the fascia to the organs. And we'll start with establishing presence. So I've just been talking a lot, and your mind is probably going around that. So if you would take a moment with me and just settle yourself down. So closing your eyes if that's comfortable. You're welcome to sit, you're welcome to stand. While we're taking this moment, we're also establishing a baseline of what is your sensation in your body right now. So take a few moments and fiddle around in your chair or standing and come to a place of ease, or as much ease as possible. And notice the intersection between your feet and the ground, the plane of contact between your feet and the ground. And if you're sitting, also the plane of contact between your sitting bones and your chair, your back of your thighs and your chair. And then turn your attention to your natural breath. As you exhale, imagine that you are settling, that all of the thoughts are settling down into your body like sand moving through an hourglass. And that you land at the bottom of the exhalation. And get a sense of your upper body now, in particular your shoulder girdle, your clavicles, your collarbones, your arms. How are they hanging? Your scapulas, where are they? What's your sense of your shoulder girdle? Is there an ease in it? Is there some tension in it? Okay. So I have some bones here, and I'm just going to ask Shayla to come in here and fix things so that I can see myself on that. You can probably see this. So I've got some bones here, and let's see. Here we go.
Oh, you're sharing?
Share.
Want to share screen? No.
I just want to see myself.
Yeah.
So I can see what everyone else is seeing. Thank goodness for Shayla. There we are. Okay. Okay. So I have these bones here, and the first step of experiential anatomy is learning something. So learning about something. So that mental event. So here I have a model of the shoulder girdle, and it would be like this on me. So the clavicle is here. And if you look at the clavicle from this aspect, you can see that it's an S-shaped bone and that it's got a bump at one end of it. And that's where it forms a joint with the sternum. And then it's got a bump at the other end, which is the joint with the acromion. And the acromion is actually part of the scapula. And if you look at the scapula, it's a very interestingly shaped bone. It's in 3 dimensions. It's got things coming out of it. It's got this great flat surface that sits against the ribs. But the interesting thing at the top is that it widens out and forms this big acromion. And we're going to feel all this on ourselves in a few moments. This acromion, which is like an epaulette or a ledge above the humeral head here, and then the shaft of the humerus or arm. And then around the back here from the acromion this is called the spine of the scapula. And you'll be able to touch that on yourself. So the scapula is a triangular shaped bone, and in a moment we'll palpate the edges of it, palpate the spine of it, palpate this fossa of it, so that you can start getting a felt sense of that in your nervous system. So let's go back to the sternoclavicular joint here. So I'm just going to take my jacket off so that you can see my bones a little better. So if you take one hand and place it on your sternoclavicular joint, and it'll feel like quite a bumpy bit just at the base of your neck. And if you use the soft pads of your fingers, not the pointy fingertips, then you can feel the topography of it. So it's got geography, it's got little bumps, it's got a top, it's got a bottom. So just feeling that. And then if you follow now palpating along the clavicle, you can notice that there's a top to it, there's a front to it, there's a bottom to it, and you may not be able to feel the back of it, but it's possible that you can sort of wrap your finger around the top a little or wrap your finger around the bottom a little bit. And again, noticing the geography of this bone, of this beautiful S-shaped bone. It's a spiralic bone, rounded. So make your way across, feeling all the different aspects of it. There may be some tenderness in it because there's muscles that attach to it. And make your way all the way across to the next joint, which is also a bump. So at the end of the clavicle, you'll feel a little bump, and that's the acromioclavicular joint. So the joint between the acromion and the clavicle. So we'll stop there for a moment and explore a little movement. So the steps of experiential anatomy are learn it, feel it, and then integrate it. And I'm going to move back and forth between this, between those three in this exploration. So if you take your fingers again to the sternoclavicular joint, this is the only place where your whole shoulder girdle is attached to another bone at this joint. So this joint with the sternum, which is the midline of the body, is what joins the bones of our arms to our midline, to our center. So if you palpate that, put your fingers on that, and then just play a little bit with various arm movements and feel how that joint moves. It's actually a synovial joint, so it's got a joint capsule and it's got fluid. So as you move your arm in different ways, feel how that joint moves. And then if you move out to the clavicle and you continue those movements with your arm, notice that the clavicle also moves and that it's a spiralic movement. So even just knowing that whenever you're moving your arm, you're actually moving it from here because that's where it's connected, can change how you move. So come back now to our palpation and feeling now this arch, this acromial arch. So that's going to be right on the edge, and you'll feel it's a bony ledge. And again, it's got topography. There's a top to it, a side to it, and a bottom of it. You won't feel the bottom of it, but you'll probably feel a dip between the acromion and the head of the humerus. So see if you can feel the change from the hard bone, a little dip, and then there's another hardness of bone, which is the head of the humerus. And if you keep your finger there in that place and move your arm, then you can feel, oh, it's the arm that's moving. And if you put your finger just on the ledge, you can feel that, oh, that's not moving when I move my arm, or it's not moving so much. So we can have movement. We talk about movement at the glenohumeral joint. We don't often talk about the movement at the sternoclavicular joint. And there's more movement too, which we'll feel in a moment. So coming back to our palpation, if you move now from the acromion and take your hand around the back to feel the spine of the scapula. So palpating again, it's got a deep fossa in there that is filled with muscle, so you're not going to be able to get down there, but you can feel all the way across to the medial border. And then if you come down, you can feel the lateral border of the scapula. And you may need to put your hand there and move your scapula a little bit so that you can actually feel the edge of it. But see if you can then palpate from the top of it to the bottom of it. Maybe finding this, the tip, the inferior angle of it. And if you've got the flexibility and you have long arms, you might even be able to move all the way across to this medial border and palpate. So then feeling this whole fossa, this whole triangle of bone. So there's lots of muscle on here, but if you gently press through it, then you can feel the bone, the hardness of the bone. Okay, so taking your hand away, and if it's comfortable for you, please close your eyes. And tune into the sensations on the side that you've palpated. What's different? How does it compare to the other side? And how would you articulate that to someone? We will be going into a breakout room a little bit later, and this is one of the things that you might want to share with someone. So what you've just done is filled in some lines in your nervous system. You've outlined your whole, well, part of your arm shoulder complex to the nervous system. And so it's going, oh, wow, I have a clavicle. I have a sternoclavicular joint. I have this joint. I have an acromion. So what you're doing is you're starting to articulate to your nervous system, this is this is that. So this scapula also moves. So it moves on the ribs. So coming back to this view here, when you move your arm, and I'm not going to go into this much because it's a big piece. Whenever your arm moves, your scapula moves. And I'm not going to go into what kind of movement, but play a little bit with moving your arm from your scapula. Imagine that that's where you're initiating movement from, and that your scapula is sliding over your ribs. So however you're moving it, there's a corresponding movement, a sliding, a gliding across the ribs. And then let that drop. And just for a moment, and this is always an interesting contrast, move your arm the way you would ordinarily move it without any of this awareness. So how would you raise your arm? How would you move your arm across? And asking yourself, where do I move from? How do I do that? And then go back to moving a little bit from your scapula. So what's the quality of that movement and how does that differ?
Then turn chat if you wanted to answer that.
Okay, so there's one other piece of movement that I want to share with you here, and that's that there's a movement within the joint itself. There's movements so we have these gross movements, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. But when we do those gross movements, there's actually smaller component movements within the joint. And they're called rolling and gliding. So for example, when we raise our arm up, if there wasn't rolling and gliding, then the head of the humerus would hit this acromion arch. But what actually happens when we raise our arm up, so here's the joint and here's the head of the humerus. When I raise my arm up, the ball is rolling, but then it's gliding down. And so as I raise it up, it doesn't hit. So rolling and gliding. So either with your arm out in front or your arm out inside, play with that. So that as you raise the arm, visualizing the rolling of the head of the humerus and the inferior glide. It's gliding down the joint. And notice how that's a little bit different perhaps than how you would normally raise your arm. And you might just want to raise your arm in your ordinary way once or twice to contrast that. Okay, there's one other physical part that I wanted to play with here, and then we'll do a little bit of heart work. So we have bones, but we've got a whole network of fascia. Our muscles are infused with fascia. Fascia is our entire connective network. And we have fascia through all the muscles surrounding all structures. And in the arm, I've got this arm here. We've got a whole sleeve of myofascia. So we can think of the bone as being the core and the muscles being like an apple around that core. So if you take your hand onto your upper arm and you hold your arm steady and you roll the flesh back and forth, like you're moving the flesh around the bone core, then you're affecting the fascia in a particular way. Now, if you hold the sleeve stationary and then move your arm, imagine moving from your bone, then that's a different experience and your fascia will be moved in somewhat of a different way. So we've got this new paradigm of bones that are floating in fascia, not connected, they're floating in fascia. Sort of like one of my colleagues, Janine Naiman, came up with this great image of bones in jello. So that when you move, through the whole movement, you're being supported by fascia, which is like gel. So play just a little bit with that, moving your arm as though it was supported through the whole arc of movement by this jello fascia. And just notice how that's different. Good. Okay. So let's leave the bones and the muscles and go to the heart. So when we start working with the heart, with the organs as, I've got my heart here. When we work with the organs as a system, then that brings a whole different quality than working with muscles and working with bones. So the organ system has weight, it's got volume. So the heart weighs about 3/4 of a pound. It's full of blood. And so when we move, it moves. And the qualities of the organ system, besides this weight and this volume, are it's grounding. It's the organs have feeling. The organs take us into slowness, into our parasympathetic nervous system. So imagine that you've got a balloon like this, a water-filled balloon, and that you can put it right on your heart. Take your hands and place them on your heart. Close your eyes if that's comfortable. And see if you can place your attention on your heart, just slightly to the left of center, full of blood, beating rhythmically. And imagine that you could breathe from your heart. There's different ways that we can bring our organs into our awareness. Breathing is one of them. And another way of doing that is humming. So with your hands on your heart, as you exhale, hum into your heart. For those yogis, you'll know that this is the Brahmari breath. So taking an inhalation, and as you exhale, send the vibration right into your heart with a hum. If you look at this cross section of the heart and the lungs at the level of the mid-chest, you can see that the lungs surround the heart in the shape of a heart, which I find really interesting. And mostly when we think of inhaling, we think of emanating, of expanding outwardly. But what's equally as true is that when we inhale, our lungs are also expanding in toward the heart and giving it a hug. So let's do that with your hands on your heart. Imagine your lungs surrounding your heart. The top of the heart is at the back. The tip is at the front. And as you inhale, imagine that your lungs are expanding inwardly and giving your heart a hug. And notice what that feels like. What you're doing is giving yourself a hug. You're embracing yourself. So keep your eyes closed if you'd like, open them if you'd like, and slowly take your hands away from your heart and place them on your lap, or if you're standing, hanging down at the sides. And as you inhale, imagine that you are starting to emanate the energy of the heart down your arms. So with each inhalation, that heart energy is moving a little bit further down the arms. And when you, even if you just imagine that that energy is filling your arms, start to move your arms in various ways and see if you can stay connected to that heart energy. Notice where you disconnect. How far can I move my arm in a certain direction before I disconnect. And you might even want to play with actual arm gestures that you would be doing in the world, reaching for something, embracing someone, pushing something, lifting something. Can you do those gestures and still stay connected to your heart? And then bring your hands up in front of you, palms up, elbows held a little bit away from your body. And close your eyes, please, if that feels comfortable. Is this a gesture of giving for you, or is this a gesture of receiving for you? We all have habits. Some of us are more on the receiving. We like to receive. Others are on the other side of the continuum, giving and perhaps moving into overgiving. So just noticing what feels natural for you, and no judgment in this. It's just is what it is. And then asking yourself the question, what do I have to do in my heart or in myself to contain both of those in this gesture? Is it a slight adjustment of the position of my heart? Is it a mental event? Is it a feeling? What do I have to do so that I can simultaneously give and receive? And from that place, can I play with some arm movements? Staying connected in that place of simultaneous giving and receiving, because the arms are how we do that. Good. And then bringing that to a stop. So I'd like to take just now 5 minutes in the breakout rooms, maybe 4 people in a room, and asking two questions. What was different doing that experiential anatomy inquiry? What did you notice about that? And then secondly, how could I see myself translating this into my life or my work? So Shayla's going to organize you all, and you can opt out if you want. And we'll come back in 5 minutes.
You're welcome to stay in the main room. Leela may not be here. I'll be moving you if there's not enough people in the rooms. And Leela, did you say 4 minutes? 5 minutes?
4 minutes, yeah.
Good. Thank you.
1 minute each.
Yeah, so because we're really are almost at the top of the hour, we have 5 minutes.
Oh, are we? Oh,
Yeah.
I've got 5 too. I guess my clock must be wrong.
Yeah, no, 5-2. We got 5 minutes to
Okay,
the top of the
okay.
hour.
Yeah,
so-
no questions.
Yeah, and they can always
Maybe one
email.
question.
You can always email you. I'm going to put your website up.
Can you talk to the people who aren't in the chat room and see if they want to enter any questions?
Sure, yes. Yeah, so if there's any questions out there, please feel free to, oh, thanks Eric for letting us know that you're taking off right at the top of the hour. See you tomorrow, Tran. Thank you for coming. Take care, Mary, Hannah. Yeah, so far I'm just gonna put in your email there, your website for the moment. I do want to mention too, as we're here and now, that there will, of course, the next session coming up at, for us, 6 p.m. PST time is tea time indeed. PST time is going to be Diane Mushko Hamilton. Just for the people that are popping off now, Leela, I'm just going to make sure that they know about her. She's a meditator, Zen teacher, and also a pioneer of integral spirituality. So yeah, she'll be there and I will be hosting. So I look forward to seeing anyone that can keep tuned in. Right now, I'm going to enter some of the other links for if you want to buy the recordings or other things that you want to dip into. Mark has, of course, his podcast, that kind of thing. And that is, I'm going to drop into the chat right now. He's got a few free ebooks as well. So I'm just going to load that up right now into the chat. And are you ready for the breakouts to come out? Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is everyone back? I'm hoping that everyone's back from the breakout rooms. I know that Daniela is really wanting to finish up on time and we're just about there.
Yeah, so go right ahead and go on because they're 8 seconds away from everyone being here with us.
Okay. So tell me when, like give me a...
Yeah, okay, right now.
When I should start.
Right now.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had some interesting discussion and made some good connections with your pals out there in embodiment land. I was hoping to have time for questions, but I know that Daniela wants to finish on time because it's very late for her. If you have questions, please, I'll have access to the chat, but also if you could perhaps post them on the Facebook page, and I'm happy to answer questions there. So I thank you very much for joining me, and I hope that you have a little bit of a taste of the experience of some experiential anatomy for your shoulder girdle, and that you can take that into your life and perhaps into your work. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Layla. Namaste.
Thank you, Shayla. Thank you, Daniela. Thanks so
I am
much.
going to invite also everyone to stay on for a little after sort of after session in the breakout rooms. Happens after each of the recordings and sessions. So I'll invite that now. Leela, if you want to stay on, you're completely welcome to do so. I know you're quite busy, so I'm not going to assume that you will.
Yeah, I'll stay on if somebody wants to talk to me.
Yeah, so I was going to open up the breakout rooms because I saw there was a message, oh, it wasn't long enough for the breakout rooms. We'd like to chat more. So if you are still up for it, stay on. If not, this is your time to drop off the call. Please do check out the recordings because, of course, it's so much to take in every 2 hours a session. Check out the recordings that you can pick up. Of course, Leela's being one of my favorites. So that's going to be on the website. And of course, I've posted all of that on the chat, every link that you could possibly want to access Mark's stuff and the embodiment channel on YouTube, etc. So let's do more of the breakout rooms and see who stays on. Okay, Leela, so people are going to start accepting into the breakout rooms. Okay. And I just want to see if I can put you in being the co-host. Maybe if I make you not co-host anymore, I can do it. Yeah, withdraw the co-host permission and then see if I can assign you to breakout room.
Am I in a breakout room?
No, you're still on the main page because I can't see, you're not coming up under unassigned at the moment. Let's see. Yeah, there's people happening here in the breakout rooms. There's 2 breakout rooms. There is 8 people total. Some are not assigned, but I don't know if I can assign you right now. I'm trying to look and see how to do that properly.
I have the host is inviting you to join breakout room 1.
There you go. There you go. Not 1. Don't go to, okay, we'll go to 1 and I'll move you. Go to 1 and I'll move you. For anyone else that's still here on the call, thank you so much for being here. I don't feel so alone. Well, I recognize a few names. Sean McDonald from other sessions.